One last major milestone on Tom's 440 Monaco. We're gonna get that done today, so stay tuned. So in the last 440 video, a lot of you guys were commenting in the comment section about how loose this belt was on the car because, well, it was flopping around when we had it running. This adjustment bolt just spins in the hole on the alternator. That's a defect in the alternator. It won't tighten up. So there's two things we can do. One, we can drill the hole out, tap it for a bigger bolt, or we can simply just replace the alternator as a warranty piece and do that. So that's what we're going to do with that, is we're going to replace the warranty, replace it under warranty and get this thing so that it will actually adjust properly and tighten up that floppy belt. And another thing everyone seemed to be concerned about was the fact that we use copper for fuel line. Now, listen to me, just bear with me for a second. I understand that copper in certain applications is not what you should use for fuel line. If you're racing, if you're off-roading, and the reason for that is because over time copper gets brittle and will tend to break under vibrations. This is not a race car or an off-road car. This is not even a daily driver. And as you guys saw when we were installing that copper fuel line, the whole way up that frame rail, it was very securely mounted the whole way up. There's not going to be a whole lot of movement in that copper line. Keep in mind, guys, copper line has been being used on a lot of vehicles for many, many years. Yes, like I said before, racing, off-roading, you're going to have those issues. This car is neither. It likely will outlast both Tom and I. Another thing that somebody had brought up was the great big monstrosity of a steel beam or whatever that was on the back of this car. And it was part of the trailer hitch system. Back in the 60s when this thing was new, this car used to haul a camper, believe it or not. So they had that tied in pretty good. It was bolted in with some pretty big bolts. And well, we took that off, and we will take this piece off here. But the framework that's still there is actually seized up, so we're gonna end up having to take the torches to it at a later date. But we will do that. And when we're putting the fuel in, you'll see there's a little bar right here as a support for this piece. Well, when you pull the license plate down, that's about as far as it goes trying to put the fuel in. So it is going to be in the way. We're going to have to cut that out to gain access to that filler neck. And while we're back here, again, somebody had mentioned the fact that they only saw exhaust coming out of one tailpipe. Well, the reason for that is this side is plugged. Either mice got in there and built a nest, or the muffler itself is disintegrated and it's being blocked, so exhaust can't come out here. You can actually feel a little bit when it's running, but notably you'll only get exhaust out of one side. And Tom had asked me, well, how does it run and why does it only come out the one side? Where does that exhaust go? Well, let me show you. Most older vehicles have the ability for heat to transfer up into the intake to help warm up the carburetor. It does it through this transfer slot here, and it goes over the other side. So when the exhaust is going through the manifolds here, well, it's hitting kind of a dead end, and it's being forced up through the intake and out the other side. So once we get the power steering on the car and get that alternator fixed and get that belt tightened up, then it will be drivable. But the only place it's going to drive to is to the exhaust shop to have that old exhaust ripped off and a new exhaust put on. So Tom will be getting that looked after at a later date. But first, we've got to get this power steering pump tore apart and back together. Well, first of all, I've got to apologize because, well, I didn't have the camera running when we were tearing this apart. But we've got it apart and we're about ready to put it back together. Let me tell you the reason why we are rebuilding this instead of replacing it. The first reason is, well, it's simply a lot cheaper to buy this $20 kit on Rock Auto and replace all the seals and washers and gaskets that it needs to rebuild it. The second reason is, on this 68 Monaco 500 with the 440, there were 3 different power steering pumps available. There was your Saginaw, there was your Federal, and there was another one, I can't remember what the name of it was. You guys can tell me down in the comment section down below. The Saginaw and the other one were readily available and not that expensive. Rock Auto, probably 50, 60 bucks. Locally here in Canada, probably about 100, 125 bucks. No big deal. The reason why there was 3 was because there were 3 main differences. And let me show you on the one that I have why this one is A, not available, and B, where I could find it was about 800 bucks. This shaft right here is the biggest shaft that they made on all 3 of these. The other 2, the shaft was smaller, but anyways, this is a big shaft, and it's, you can tell which one it is because it's got the big hex insert on the inside. So that told me that this was the Federal pump. When I went looking for it, none available. Rock Auto had one, it was 800 bucks. We weren't about to go that route, so 20 bucks, bought us a kit. Here we are, tearing it down and putting it together. I did reach out to a few guys who know these Mopars really good. Dave McGraw, my local guy here in Moncton, says he had one, but couldn't find it. And Luke from Coastal Auto Reaction knew that he had a couple as well. And when I told him it was a Federal, he basically shook his head and said good luck with that. So just he knew what we were up against with this thing. So anyways, we've got it apart. Let's get back to it and show you what's involved in putting it back together. So first things first, this little lock ring right here is what holds everything in place on the actual pulley side of the pump. We had a heck of a time getting this ring off, and as you can see right in here, we've got some marks where we were beating on it. What we ended up doing was soaking this overnight, and when we got it all out and dried off, this was just actually tapped right off. So we were able to spin that out and take the seal that was in here out, and then this piece here basically just kind of slid out. Now it's actually pretty hard to come out because there is a bearing or a bushing in there, and things were quite dry and gummed up. Anyways, we got this out. The new kit does have a replacement O-ring that we're going to replace here, so we're going to get that out and replace that. And I did take the whole shaft assembly out here as well. And if we flip this over, there's a ring in here that holds it from sliding all the way out, so all we had to do was tap on that all the way in. And again, it was a little tough because things were gummed up and this came apart. Let me get some light. So in there, you will see the impellers and the fins. So when that spins around, it's compressing the fluid and pushing it out the pressure side. We had all that apart, and we've got it good and greased up, lubed up in there. A lot of guys will tell you to use Vaseline, and we use a different product. But anyways, Vaseline, grease, anything will work as long as you can get that in there and get that thing so that it spins quite freely. And this does now. So what we've got to do is we've got to take our seal kit, we're going to open this up, and we're going to start replacing everything that had a seal that we could see, and it looks like everything's there, so let's get at it. All right, so this is the O-ring that came off the actual outside edge of this pump. We're going to use that, we're going to save that to the very end and put that on there. You may or may not be able to see the difference in the one on the right is the original, and it's all squared off, and the new one is round the way it's supposed to be to help seal that. This one's old and brittle, and this one is new and supple. So that'll be the last one that we put on before we put the reservoir back together. And then we've got this one here, which is the one that we're going to replace for this piston here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grease it up a little bit. I ran out of my good grease, and I'm just using a little bit of bearing grease here. I mean, it'll be fine, totally fine. So this is the next piece that goes in here. And this is the piece that faces upwards. All right, with a little bit of persuasion, we got that in there. Now it's time that we can take our ring and we can put that back in place and secure that down. I don't think it's going anywhere, but this is what it's meant for. Okay, so with a hammer and a chisel, we managed to get that spun back on the way it's supposed to be, and it's in there, it's in good spot. Now we've got to get the seal in place to seal any fluid from coming out around that. And if you've got a 22 millimeter deep socket, it'll fit over the shaft and down far enough that you can tap that seal into place. Just for easy going, I am going to grease up that outside of that seal a little bit. and we'll give her a few love taps to get her in place. Just like that, that seal is in. Now we'll flip it over and we'll work on getting this little solenoid put back into place. Alright, so we've got that back into place and that's moving freely. Now we can seal that up with this piece right here, and there is a new copper washer that seals that up. Now we do have one of these square end or square sided O-rings that's going to go in here. This is what seals up the reservoir when it goes on against that. So we're going to make sure that that's in there. We'll put a little bit of grease to keep it in place. And then you've got this as well, and that's what's going to keep that sealed. There's no bolt that goes in here because the reservoir only has a single bolt. So we're going to save that right to the very end before we put that cover on there. So now we're ready to put the big seal on and put the reservoir back together, and then we can call this project done once we get it installed on the vehicle. So we did manage to get the reservoir all cleaned up. The only thing I'm concerned about is that this little screen filter in here is caked up pretty good. So I'm just going to take some brake cleaner and a wire brush and we'll give that a clean up. Alright, and as you can see, all the black gunk is now cleaned off that as best we could most of the way around. Air is still going through it pretty good. So let's get this installed back onto the pump. And that is now sealed the whole way around there, nice and even, and we'll secure it tightly with this 1/2-inch bolt. Okay, so that's all there is to it. What we're going to do now is I'll wipe all this down. We'll clean it off with some brake cleaner. We'll give it a nice quick coat of black paint, make it look good on the front of that new motor. Okay guys, so it's been a couple of days since we've been able to get back onto the 440 with this power steering thing that we've been going through with the wrong hose and blah blah blah. So we ended up finding the right hose and determining that the one that Tom had originally ordered was not the right hose. So we were able to find the right hose and we're getting ready to install that. Before we do that, we've got to get the power steering pulley installed onto the power steering pump. And we've got a pretty fun, unique way that we're going to do that. Let me show you. So in an effort to somewhat shrink this shaft, we've had this pump in the freezer for a number of hours now. And we're going to take the heat gun and we're going to heat up the actual pulley itself so that, in essence, it should slide on there. At least that's the plan. So I'm going to put this back in the freezer. We'll get this heated up, and then hopefully we'll be able to crank this thing up, get her together. So some people might say, let's use a flame. Well, I've already painted this thing, so I don't want to ruin it with the flame. So we're going to try a little bit of heat. Hopefully it's enough. Let's see if it works. Oh yeah. Just going to let that sit for a few minutes. Wait. 234 degrees right now in the center of that thing. We'll give it a minute or two, see how hot we can get her. 285. Well, it seems as though we can't get the temperature to get above, 315, 317. And it's been running here for about 5 minutes. So I think that's as hot as we're going to get. And we've had the power steering pump in the freezer. This is down to about 3 or 4 degrees. About 12 or so, 9.8. So let's see how far we can get with what we got. Make sure put it on there the right way. Make sure put it on there the right way. Make sure put it on there the right way. All right. So we've got the pump mounted by the 2 bolts here and then the one on the back side over here. And as I come around with the camera, you'll notice that the pulley in its current configuration lines up with the belt for the alternator and the water pump. That's not what we need. We need it to line up with the balancer or the crank pulley over here. So I'm going to have to go back and look through my picture of where or which direction that pulley is mounted, if it's mounted this way or the reverse. I'm hoping it's not the reverse because it's going to be a pain in the rear end to yank that thing off there and switch it around and do that whole process over again. Anyways, by now we will know that the pulley should have been on the other way. Okay, so we're back out at the shop and we've got our torch, we've got the power steering pump inside the freezer, so now we're gonna pull it out, heat up the pulley, and hopefully use the pullers to pull it off a lot more easily than we did the first time and ruining the pulley. Not sure I showed you that, but we'll get to that. So there it is. And before this thaws out too much further, I tried getting that off with just the puller by itself, and well, we bent the pulley quite a bit, so we're gonna have to try and fix that. But we gotta get to this real quick before it thaws out. Come on. No, you. Thank God for editing. It's a brand new bottle.
No, I would say it's not the bottle, it's probably the igniter.
Shut up.
Just saying.
Oh, you. Holy son of a gun. That freaking thing ain't working. We'll use the teeny one till Tom finds the lighter. This thing here's running out of gas.
Hey, that's cold.
Great.
Like really cold.
It's like 23 degrees. I just put the thing on it.
Yeah, buddy. Oh, yeah.
So what we'll do, that's what it was supposed to do the first time I tried it, but it didn't. So there's what we did to it the first time when I didn't have any heat. The jaws on the puller, they were attached here, there, and over here. And what they were doing was they were squeezing this backside in and distorting the pulley. So we will be able to heat that up and straighten that out a lot easier than doing it when the metal's cold, but that's for another time before we go and put this back on. Anyways, we've got to get the power steering pump fixed up so that we can put this back on. We'll be right back. Okay guys, I don't know where we are with this video. I know we've been frigging around with this power steering long enough, and over the course of several weeks, I think we finally are prepared to put this power steering line back, or I should say back, but put it on the Monaco. Let's talk a little bit about what we had to do to the line to get it to work. So Tom had ordered a power steering line for the car, and it had this end on it. The problem is that at the other end of the hose, it wouldn't fit the power steering box. I ordered a hose from Napa, and it had this end on it, which did fit the box. But the other end of that hose didn't fit the power steering pump. So what Tim, my mechanic, did for me today was we took the hose that had the small end on it and we cut the end off that didn't work. We did the same thing to the other hose, and because we have an AC crimping tool for high pressure line, well, we made our own hose, and there we have it. Let's hope it doesn't leak. I don't think it will because it was a son of a gun trying to get that fitting just to go down into the hose before we even crimped it. Well, the crimp is on there, it's now holding, and we've got to get this installed. So let's get this installed. We think we've got the proper belt this time to get that going. So I'm going to set this up for a little bit of a time lapse. Let's get it done. Okay, so the good news is that we cut that hose properly and it fits in here just nicely. This end goes on and tightens up. This end over here, same thing. I am going to clock that back a little bit more so that that hose actually kind of goes over that way more. The bad news is that that belt still is a little bit too short. We did measure it, but measurements must be off. They're going by an inside or an outside diameter, and we're doing the other. Nevertheless, we need a couple more inches on that belt. That's what she said. Anyways, what we're going to do is call this video quits. The biggest problem we were having was with that power steering line, and we've got that fixed. So we'll be able to move on to getting the transmission leak fixed. Very simple fix. It's where the shifter detent goes through the case, the shaft that shifts from park to neutral drive. The seal is leaking, and that's what's leaving the puddles all over my brand new garage floor, Tommy. Just saying. But we're going to get that fixed. We're going to drop the pan, which means drain all the transmission fluid out of it to get that shifter shaft unhooked from the inside and fix that seal, put it back together, put a brand new transmission pan on it, and we can call this project pretty much done. At this point, Tom has had the car over to the exhaust shop. They've looked at it. They've kind of told him what they're going to need. He's going to see if he can track down whatever mufflers he wants to put with this. And that will be the kind of the last thing before we can actually get this thing on the road and put some miles on it. So we're going to call it quits on this video. I hope you guys have stuck through this long. We've got lots of other projects that we're working on. We're getting ready to start the Yugoda project. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to leave a link right up here to the explanation of that. In short, my 1987 Yugo is getting a 2005 Toyota Echo transplant. That's all I'm going to give you. You got to tune in if you want to see more of that. We've also got some work that we're going to be doing to Dale the truck. We have cruise control to add to this thing. We've got a couple of other things to tidy up from when we did the fuel injection install last year. So just a little bit of wiring and plumbing that we're going to clean up. We've also got the Chrysler Cordoba. You guys have probably not seen a lot of this car in a long time, but we will be getting back to this. We've also got fuel injection that we're likely going to add to this some point in the future. Don't know when that's going to happen, but we got to get it out, get it cleaned up. This car might be making a trip to Montreal from where we are. That's about an 8-hour drive to Nick's garage. One, I want to show off my car to Nick, but two, I'm going to be meeting up with not only Nick and George at Nick's garage, but with Luke at Coastal Auto Reaction. You guys don't know who Luke is. I'll leave a link to his channel, and make sure you go over there, subscribe, and all kinds of great stuff over there. So a few collaborations coming up real quick. One last thing is I want to give a shameless plug to some merch. First link in the description box below. If you guys want to help support the channel in other ways than just watching these videos, I want to encourage you. Go buy a t-shirt, a hat, a hoodie, whatever you want to do. That money that we get paid a little bit for each sale goes back into the channel so that we can afford to do little things like cruise control or working on other projects. So please do that. Make sure you go down and leave a comment. Tell me what you think of all these projects that we're working on and maybe some of the things that you want to see come to the channel. Guys, stay focused on the windshield, not the rearview mirror. I love you. God bless. Let's do it again real soon.